I am telling you, I mean, you literally cannot possibly understand modern relationship drama until you have watched three people forced to live, sleep, and basically betray each other in a single 150 square foot room.
Are you joking?
No, I'm completely serious. All because their government literally ran out of concrete. I mean, you are completely missing the mechanism of what makes this brilliant.
Brilliant.
Right, okay, yes, brilliant. If you look at what was actually happening in 1920s Soviet silent cinema, this specific piece of work isn't just some dusty antique. It is a properly genius blueprint for how we put human psychology onto a screen.
A foundational blueprint.
Yeah.
Right. I mean, I have sat through it, mate, and I am telling you, it is an absolute slog.
It is not a slog.
It is a bit overhyped, it is rather dull, and it drags on forever with people just, staring at teacups. And frankly, the morality of it is dodgy in places, even for back then.
Oh, come on.
You are looking at a bloated excuse for a melodrama and calling it a masterpiece, just because it is old, it is Russian, and it's in black and white.
I am not looking at it just because it's old. I mean, I am looking at the architectural and the social realities of the era that actually forced this narrative into existence.
You are looking at a contrived, soapy mess. I mean, you've got to be joking if you think anyone watching this today isn't just going to see a massive, pretentious ego trip by a director who is just, playing with expensive toys.
All right, hold on a second. I am stopping you there. Because if you sit at this table and just dismiss it, you do a massive disservice to the actual history.
Here we go.
No, hear me out. For those of you joining us, I want you to imagine being thrust into 1927. Specifically, an obscure 2,025-meter reel of Soviet silent film called Tretya Meshchanskaya.
Rolls right off the tongue, doesn't it?
Well, it translates roughly to Third Bourgeois Street, but you probably know it in English as bed and sofa. And we are going to unpack exactly why this film is either a lost masterclass that practically predicts the DNA of every claustrophobic relationship drama you have ever binged,
Or an overindulgent shambles.
which it is, as my colleague here insists on arguing.
Cinema, the magic vehicle, a comprehensive guide. Journey 1, 1913 to 1950.
But go on, lay out this gritty reality that supposedly excuses it. Defend the madness.
It's not madness, it is survival. We have to start with the factual historical context provided in our core source text.
Right.
I mean, 1920s Moscow was in the grip of a severe, crippling housing shortage.
Right.
And when I say housing shortage, we need to understand the mechanics of what that actually meant on the ground for these people. We aren't talking about, struggling to get a mortgage.
No, obviously not.
We're talking about the aftermath of the revolution and the Russian Civil War.
Yeah.
Millions of people flooded into the cities from the countryside. The Bolsheviks had expropriated the large apartments of the wealthy, and were just, artificially subdividing them.
I'm chopping them up into little boxes.
Exactly. You would have a massive dining room hastily chopped up with thin wooden partitions, or sometimes literally just chalk lines on the floor,
Chalk lines. Mental.
shoving 5 different families into a space meant for one.
So it was cramped. Yes, everyone was miserable. We get it.
Cramped is a massive understatement. It was a total collapse of physical boundaries, which inherently leads to a collapse of social boundaries.
Right.
I mean, traditional social relationships were completely turned upside down by the sheer violent lack of physical space. You couldn't have a private argument, a private romance, or a private breakdown. Everything was completely public.
Which is terribly convenient for a film director looking for drama.
It's authentic. So into this architectural powder keg, the director, Abram, introduces our trio. We've got Nikolai. Now, he's a building foreman, which is deeply ironic given the housing crisis.
Very subtle, that.
Our source describes him as direct and trusting in his masculinity. He is a straightforward, physical, slightly oblivious bloke.
Oblivious being the operative word there, mate.
Right. And then we have his wife, Ludmila. She is passionate, she wants more out of life, but she is completely neglected by Nikolai, who is out building the great Soviet future, but entirely ignoring his own home.
As blokes in these films tend to do.
They are living in this tiny, claustrophobic one-room flat on 3rd Meshchanskaya Street. And this is a brilliant bit of geographical trivia that actually matters to the tone. There were actually 3 different streets in Moscow at the time, all named Third Bourgeois Street.
Wait. 3 streets with the exact same name.
Exactly. It completely adds to this overarching, chaotic, bureaucratic nightmare. You are just a cog in a massive machine, completely anonymous, living in a space so small you can't swing a cat.
A very bleak picture, yes.
And into this tiny flat steps, Vladimir, He is a young printer, just moved to Moscow. He is an old friend of Nikolai's from the army or the provinces, and because of the housing shortage, he has literally nowhere else to go.
Not a single bed.
No hotels, no spare rooms, nothing. So he lodges with Nikolai and Ludmila in their single room.
Right, hold on a second. This is where I call absolute rubbish.
Why? That was a reality?
A bloke moves into a single room with a married couple. I do not care what the bureaucratic nightmare was. That is a bloody mental.
It was necessary.
Any normal person looks at that setup. A husband, a neglected wife, and the husband's sensitive best mate in 150 square feet and sees an absolute disaster waiting to happen.
Well, what were they supposed to do? Leave him on the freezing streets of Moscow to die of exposure? It was the literal, documented reality of the era. People were sleeping in bathtubs.
I'm saying the script uses it as a contrivance. You look at this and see a fascinating socioeconomic study of the new economic policy era.
Because it is.
I look at it and see a script written by Victor Shklovsky and Abram that is just using a historical crisis as a flimsy, highly convenient excuse for a soapy, melodramatic love triangle.
It is not flimsy.
It is entirely contrived. Oh, no rooms left in Moscow. I guess I will just sleep at the foot of your marital bed, mate. Hope you don't mind. It is ridiculous.
It is absolutely not contrived because the film is reflecting contemporary behavior and thought in the Soviet Union, which the source text notes was still incredibly rare to actually see on screen at the time.
Rare because people went to the cinema to escape misery, not watch it.
Remember, the Soviet studio system, Sovkino, was mostly pumping out grand, sweeping epics about the masses. Eisenstein was making Battleship Potemkin. It was all about the collective, the proletariat, the grand historical struggle.
Right, big ships, big crowds.
Exactly. To point a camera at three miserable people in a room having a domestic dispute was radical. Traditional social relationships were fracturing. You say it is a flimsy excuse for a soapy drama. I am telling you it is a brilliant, almost scientific way to force three specific archetypes into an emotional centrifuge to see what separates.
A centrifuge? Oh, you can't be serious.
I am.
It is a contrivance to get the wife and the best mate in the same room so they can inevitably hook up. It does not take a genius or a centrifuge to see where this mental setup is heading.
It's about the execution.
You put a sensitive intellectual in a box with a neglected wife and an oblivious husband who treats her like a lamp, and you do not need a history degree to guess the ending.
But the mechanism of how it gets to that ending is what makes it properly genius. Let's look at Abram Room, the director, because he wasn't just some bloke with a camera who decided to film a soap opera. He was a psychologist by training.
Oh, a psychologist. Well, that certainly excuses the bloated runtime, does it? We are not bored. We are being psychoanalyzed.
It completely explains the nuance of the performances. Before this, he directed 2 adventure films set during the Revolution, including a film in 1926 called Bukta Smerti, or Death Bay.
Right.
And even in those grand action films, he was recognized for combining dynamic narrative with a semi-documentary style and careful behavioral analysis.
Behavioral analysis.
He wasn't interested in the broad theatrical pantomime acting that defined early silent film. Clutching the chest to show sadness or shaking a fist to show anger.
The standard silent movie stuff.
Exactly. He brought that exact psychological rigor to this one-room flat. He focused on micro-expressions, the spatial distance between characters, the way a person aggressively drinks a cup of tea to show resentment.
Right. Well, let's talk about this supposed psychological rigor when it comes to the great betrayal of the plot. Because it does not take Sigmund Freud to predict this one.
Fine, let's look at the betrayal, because the mechanics of it are handled masterfully. Nikolai, the husband, has to go away on a business trip.
Of course he does.
And what does he do? He leaves Ludmila in Vladimir's charge, which straight away highlights the deeply ingrained patriarchal assumptions that survived the revolution.
Spot on.
He is literally handing his wife over to his mate, like a piece of luggage to look after, while he is out building socialism.
The sheer arrogance of the bloke. Keep an eye on the missus, will you? Make sure she doesn't wander off. It is incredibly patronizing.
Exactly. But Vladimir, being this sensitive, intelligent printer, doesn't just sit around reading the newspaper and ignoring her.
Obviously not.
He actually pays attention to Ludmila. He sees that she is passionate, stifled, and deeply neglected by a husband who just views her as part of the apartment's furniture.
So he makes his move.
Well, Vladimir starts taking her out. He takes her to the movies. And here is where the visual metaphor gets really interesting. He takes her for an airplane ride.
An airplane ride in 1920s Moscow? Because that happens every day, doesn't it?
Yes. But think about the contrast there, the specific mechanism of that visual. You have these characters trapped in this claustrophobic, dirty, cramped one-room flat where they are literally living on top of each other, navigating chalk lines on the floor.
It's grim.
It is heavy, it is dark, it is suffocating, and Vladimir takes her up into the sky. It is this massive, expansive, exhilarating breath of fresh air.
All right, I see what you're saying.
It is not just a date, it is a symbol of Soviet modernity, of futurism, of escaping the dirt and the grinding poverty of the past. For a brief moment, they are literally above the misery of the housing crisis. It is freedom.
Okay, I will give you the contrast of the airplane versus the flat, the sky versus the box. That is a neat visual metaphor.
Thank you.
But let's look at the reality of what happens next, because this is where your psychological masterpiece turns into an absolute farce.
It's not a farce.
Nikolai returns from his business trip. He finds out his best mate has been sleeping with his wife. Naturally, he is furious. Any normal person would be. He wants to pack his bags and move out immediately.
Right.
But he can't because of this famous housing shortage you love talking about. He literally has nowhere to go.
Yes.
So what happens? What is the grand dramatic resolution to this ultimate betrayal? Nikolai resigns himself to sleeping on the sofa while Vladimir, the bloke who just nicked his wife, gets to share the marital bed with Ludmila.
Exactly.
In the exact same room. They literally just swap furniture.
It is brilliant. It is a spot-on, pitch-black satire of the societal upheaval of the time.
Are you joking?
No. The entire social order has collapsed. The old rules of marriage and honor are completely incompatible with the material reality of their lives, and they are forced to literally rearrange the furniture to accommodate this massive betrayal because the state hasn't built enough houses.
Oh, man.
It is an emotional Tetris game where none of the pieces fit, but they're forced into the box anyway. It is a physical manifestation of a broken society.
That is rubbish, mate. You call it brilliant satire, I call it a toxic shambles.
How is it not satire? It is completely upending the traditional marital structure. It is mocking the idea that bourgeois morality can survive when you don't even have a private room to be moral in.
Because look at how it actually resolves. According to the source, after a while of this ridiculous arrangement, the friendly atmosphere returns.
Well, yes. People adapt.
They just get used to it, the outrage vanishes. But then, what do these two enlightened, modern Soviet men do? Do they form some sort of progressive, egalitarian, utopian household? Do they share the chores?
No, they don't.
No, they both just start treating Ludmila like a servant.
Well, yes, that is the tragedy of it.
It is not a tragedy, it is ridiculous. Think about it. And you listening, imagine being in this situation. Imagine being stuck in a single room with your husband who you have alienated and emasculated, and your lover who you have risked your entire social standing for.
It's a nightmare.
And instead of high drama or romance or some profound philosophical shift, they both just sit around expecting you to make the tea, polish their boots, and wash their socks. It is pathetic.
But that is exactly the point Abram is making. You are entirely missing the layer of social critique.
Am I?
Yes. The fact that both men revert to treating her like a domestic servant is the critique. The traditional social relationships were turned upside down by the revolution, yes. The state said men and women were equal now.
On paper.
Exactly, on paper. But Room is showing that the ingrained sexism, the deeply rooted patriarchy, didn't just vanish overnight because a bureaucrat signed a piece of paper. He is exposing the absolute hypocrisy of the new Soviet man.
I still say they're just terrible people.
These men think they are so modern, adapting to this wild avant-garde bed and sofa dynamic. But underneath it all, their mechanism for dealing with women is exactly the same as their grandfathers. They still view women as subservient. It is incredibly faithful to contemporary thought.
I reckon it is just a bunch of miserable people in a miserable room. And to make it worse, the director drags it out for 2,025 meters of film. We are forced to watch them drink tea and ignore her in agonizing real time.
Which brings us to how it was filmed. The technical achievements of this film are monumental, regardless of how you personally feel about the character's domestic arrangement.
Oh, here we go. The classic technical defense. The plot is an absolute slog, so please look at the camera angles, ignore the boredom, appreciate the lighting.
The cinematography by Grigory Gibber and the art direction by Vasily Rakals and Sergei Yudkovich are phenomenal, and they are essential to how the story works.
Fine, tell us about the lighting.
Let's talk about the authenticity, the mechanism of the set design. The apartment isn't some vast, airy Hollywood soundstage where the walls magically disappear so the camera can track back.
No, it looks like a proper closet.
The locations are completely authentic to the suffocating dimensions of a real Moscow flat. But the real kicker, and this is a massive historical misconception that people always get wrong, is the mechanism they used for the exterior street scenes. The hidden camera.
Yes, the famous hidden camera trick.
It's not a trick, it was a revolution in visual language. People today think the radicals of the 1950s invented the hidden camera technique.
The French, usually.
Right, the French New Wave, cinema verite,
Yeah.
people sneaking lightweight cameras onto the streets of Paris to capture real life. But they didn't. Soviet directors in the silent period were doing it decades earlier.
Okay, credit where it's due.
And it wasn't easy. These weren't iPhones. These were massive, heavy, hand-cranked wooden boxes. Abram Room and Grigory Gibber were literally hiding these giant cameras inside delivery carts or setting up fake walls on street corners to capture the authentic, unvarnished reactions of real Moscow citizens walking by.
Right, okay, but
It gave them an intimate, penetrating, excellent observation of human attitudes. They weren't just building sterile sets and hiring hundreds of extras to pretend to be a crowd.
sure.
They were capturing reality on the fly to give this story a semi-documentary grit. By capturing the real, freezing, chaotic streets of Moscow, they grounded the melodrama of the apartment in absolute truth.
Wait, hold on, let me jump in here.
Go ahead.
Just because they stuck a massive camera in a wooden box on the back of a horse cart and filmed some people walking down a street who didn't know they were being filmed, that doesn't automatically make the narrative a masterpiece.
It makes it technically pioneering. It changes the entire texture of the film.
It makes for a neat bit of pub trivia. Sure, you can sit there and say, oh, did you know the Soviet directors did the hidden camera trick before the French did? Brilliant. Fantastic for a trivia night.
It's more than trivia.
But does it actually serve the story, or is it just director Abram Room playing with extremely expensive state-funded toys while his actors are freezing on the pavement?
Of course, it serves the story. The whole point of the film is spatial and psychological contrast.
Contrast.
You have the deeply claustrophobic, hyper-analyzed, agonizingly slow behavior inside that tiny flat, where every single glance is loaded with tension. And you contrast that with the chaotic, unfiltered, sprawling reality of the city outside.
I was thinking it's padding.
It shows that their petty little domestic drama is happening in the middle of a massive, indifferent metropolis that is undergoing historical trauma.
I think it is a gimmick to cover up the pacing issues. It is a bloated film. And you have to ask yourself, does sticking a hidden camera on a street corner really excuse the fact that we have to watch these incredibly unlikable characters bicker in a single room for an hour and a half?
They aren't just bickering.
He is making his actors miserable in this cramped space, forcing them to emote over teacups, and then he is out on the street showing off his new camera trick to the boys at Sovkino.
You are being so incredibly cynical, it is blinding you to the innovation. It is not a gimmick to literally invent a new mechanism for capturing human reality on film.
Innovation doesn't equal a good movie.
In the real scenery, the people are real. The breath coming out of their mouths and the cold air is real. It completely changed what audiences thought cinema could be.
For the academics, maybe?
Before this, silent films were often very theatrical, very artificial. This brought a level of psychological realism. Real people, real streets, real dirt that was unheard of in 1927.
I am looking at it from the perspective of someone actually having to sit through it today without a history textbook in my lab.
Well, that's your problem right there.
You can praise the technical wizardry all you want, but if the narrative itself feels like wading through treacle, the hidden camera just feels like a distraction. Look at this real bloke on the street slipping on the ice. Ignore the fact that our main characters are currently having a 30-minute silent standoff over who washes the dishes.
The standoff over the dishes is the prologue to one of the most daring, radical feminist narratives of the entire decade.
Oh, good grief. Feminist narrative, here we go. The men treat her like a maid, but it's feminist.
Yes. Let's actually look at the climax of the narrative, the mechanism of the plot's resolution, because this is where the film completely transcends its era.
If you say so.
Ludmila, after being treated like a glorified tea dispenser by both her husband and her lover, is exhausted. She actually decides that Nikolai, the oblivious husband, is perhaps the more tolerable of the two.
A glowing endorsement.
She is thinking of kicking Vladimir out and going back to the previous miserable arrangement. But then, a massive biological crisis hits. She falls pregnant.
And because she has been swapping beds in a single room, neither bloke has a clue who the father is. What a shocker.
Exactly. And how do these two enlightened, modern men react? Do they step up? Do they offer support?
Take a wild guess.
No. The mechanism of their hypocrisy kicks in immediately. Both Nikolai and Vladimir completely deny responsibility. They turn their backs on her, they close ranks as men, and they both demand that she go and get an abortion.
A proper pair of gentlemen, these two, really showing the best of the new Soviet man.
This is where Abram Room is directly tackling monumental structural issues. Women's liberation, the realities of abortion, and women's autonomy in a rapidly shifting society.
Heavy stuff for a melodrama.
And we have to contextualize this. Lenin actually legalized abortion in the Soviet Union in 1920, making it the first country in the world to do so in all circumstances.
That's a huge historical point, yes.
So Room is taking a very real, very current political reality and putting it right in the center of his domestic drama. To have a film in 1927 openly discussing abortion and a woman's right to choose her own destiny over the demands of men was incredibly radical.
Right, so she bows to the pressure, she goes to the clinic.
Yes, the men force the issue, they pressure her relentlessly. So she goes to the abortion clinic. And then the two men, sitting in their flat, decide to visit her after the operation.
So thoughtful of them.
And our source text specifically notes this brilliant, pathetic detail about their behavior. They show up to the abortion clinic dressed up to the nines.
Put their absolute best suits on for a trip to the abortion clinic. Classy behavior.
It perfectly highlights their vanity. It shows their absolute detachment from the physical traumatic reality of what she's actually going through.
They want to look like the good guys.
Exactly. They dress up to play the roles of concerned, benevolent, forgiving men. They want to look good for each other and for the public. But when they get to the clinic, preening in their suits, they are in for a massive shock. Lyudmila isn't there. She didn't go through with it.
She's legged it.
She is not at the clinic, and she's not at home either. The men return to the flat, the site of all this misery, and they find a note. She has packed her things and left them both.
Finally, some sense.
She realizes, with crystal clarity, that they are both entirely useless, selfish men. She realizes the whole system is rigged against her, whether she is with a traditionalist or a supposed modern intellectual.
They're both awful.
So she walks out on the entire toxic situation to forge her own path alone. She rejects the husband, she rejects the lover, and she completely rejects their demands over her body.
And then we get the famous line.
Yes. The two men are standing there, utterly defeated, pondering the empty room, looking at the absolute mess they have made of their lives. And one of them delivers this iconic, shocking line of dialogue on the title card. He looks at the other and says, I think we are both bastards.
Right.
It is brilliant. It is a moment of a total shattering self-awareness. The ego of the Soviet man completely punctured.
You cannot be serious.
Right.
You are legitimately calling this a feminist triumph. Oh, look, the men finally realized they were bad. The bar is literally subterranean for these two blokes, and you are cheering because they managed to vaguely acknowledge it at the very end of the film.
It is a triumph because of Lyudmila's actions. The mechanism of the plot is that she reclaims her agency. She leaves them in the dust.
He leaves, yes, but the film still centers its emotional climax on the men's reaction to her leaving. You sit there saying it's this great feminist text transcending its era. I say it is an incredibly egocentric exploration of male inadequacy, masquerading as progressive thought.
It's exposing that inadequacy.
Let's not forget the crucial bit of context the source points out. This entire plot is supposedly based on the real private life of the famous revolutionary poet Vladimir Mayakovsky.
Which makes it even more fascinating. It is a roman à clef. It is taking real historical figures and putting a thin coat of fictional paint over them to analyze their behavior. Mayakovsky lived with Lilia Brick and her husband Osip in a famous real-life ménage à trois.
No, it makes it a massive vanity project. It is an inside joke for the Moscow intelligentsia.
It's self-critique.
Mayakovsky gets into a messy, highly publicized love triangle, and his mates Shklovsky and Room write a film about it where the stand-in characters get to look thoughtfully into the middle distance at the end and say, gosh, we sure are complex bastards, aren't we?
You are completely missing the tone.
It is incredibly self-indulgent. It does not erase the fact that for the previous hour and a half, the audience has had to watch them act like absolute sociopaths to this woman.
Acknowledging their own toxic, hypocritical behavior is a huge evolutionary step for a film of that era. It is a complete subversion of the typical cinematic ending where the woman is punished for her infidelity and the men are vindicated and restore order.
I suppose that's true.
Here, the men are left with absolutely nothing but their own pathetic self-realization, and the woman escapes into the future on a train. It is an ambivalent mood, half serious, half satirical. It refuses to give you a clean, moralistic ending.
It is half-baked, is what it is. A bloke realizing he is a bastard after he has already ruined a woman's life and driven her to the doors of an abortion clinic isn't a feminist victory. It is just a bloke wanting to have the very last word so he can feel profound about his own terrible behavior.
That is such a cynical read.
The fact that you think this makes Abram Room some kind of visionary pioneer is exactly why we need to look at what the film historians actually say about him, because I think they are letting him off the hook just as much as you are.
Oh, you want to bring the historians into this? Fine. Let's talk about the core text we're using here, cinema, the magic vehicle. Because if you look at the actual documented historical research, it completely destroys your cynical little argument.
Bring it on. Let's hear what the sacred text has to say about our two bastards in a room.
Look, the research in cinema, the magic vehicle, is spot on here. The authors argue that Abram Room was building a completely new visual language for the medium.
A new visual language.
Right. They explicitly, in black and white, call this film one of the most interesting films of the 1920s. They praise its originality and its faithful portrayal of contemporary thought. Room was intentionally fusing psychological realism with semi-documentary grit, because he had the absolute stones to try something nobody else in the state-funded studio system dared to do.
Or so the book claims.
He looked at the grand propaganda films and said, no, the real struggle is happening in the bedroom.
I reckon the book is being way too kind to him, to be honest. It is falling into the trap of retroactively assigning genius to messy experiments.
How can you possibly say that? It is a definitive historical analysis by experts.
Because film historians absolutely love a tortured genius. You call it ambition, the book calls it originality. I call it a massive ego trip.
It was an evolution.
Just because a director uses an authentic, freezing apartment and forces his crew to hide cameras in wooden boxes on the icy streets of Moscow doesn't automatically make him a genius. It makes him a proper narcissist with a camera who is obsessed with his own cleverness.
Oh, rubbish.
And I think the book lets him off the hook because it is a classic, and historians are absolutely terrified to say that a certified classic might actually be a bit boring and deeply flawed.
Rubbish. Absolute rubbish. It is not an ego trip. It is an evolution of the medium itself.
Is it, though?
Yes.
Yeah.
The book gives you the actual context of Savkino, the studio system, and the incredible technical breakthroughs that literally changed how realism is filmed today. It notes that Room acquired his technical skill first in the theater, which is exactly why the single-room dynamic works so well.
He essentially just filmed a stage play.
No. He intimately knew the mechanism of how to block and stage human tension in a confined space. He knew how to make silence loud. If you find the scale of a silent film a bit of a slog, that is on you, my friend, not the history. You just don't have the patience to engage with the visual language of the past.
It is not about patience, it's about pacing. I am just saying I am looking at it with a modern eye, and it is half brilliant and half absolute nonsense.
Well, at least you admit it's half brilliant.
Yes, the hidden camera stuff is undeniably clever from a technical standpoint. Yes, the ending has a bit of bite, even if it is self-indulgent. But the book defends him entirely through a historical lens, treating every frame as sacred.
Because it's important.
I am sitting here thinking, mate, cut 30 minutes out of those grim apartment scenes, stop showing them aggressively drinking tea in silence, and we would actually have a tighter, much more impactful story. It is bloated, and no amount of historical context changes the runtime.
You cannot edit a 1927 silent film based on the fractured attention span of a modern viewer who expects everything to be cut like a music video.
I don't want a music video. I want a story that moves.
The duration, the agonizing silences, the mundane, repetitive actions, that is the psychological realism. The sheer boredom of their domestic life is the mechanism that drives the betrayal. The book understands that context.
The book excuses it. There's a massive difference. Oh, it is a faithful portrayal of contemporary thought. Maybe contemporary thought in 1927 Moscow was just really, really slow and deeply miserable.
You are being deliberately obtuse. The book clearly outlines how this film tackled the peculiar conglomerate of conventions in a rapidly emerging, highly unstable society.
Big words for a small flat.
Traditional relationships were turned entirely upside down. It wasn't just a melodrama. It was a documentary of a societal breakdown disguised as a love triangle. Room was a pioneer who captured a world in transition.
Pioneer, or just a madman with a megaphone taking advantage of his mate's marital drama? Let's let the audience decide. Right. We have done 40 of these shows, so you, listening at home, know we are never going to agree on this. If you want to see if I am just being a cynical git or if the book actually has it right and my colleague across the table isn't completely delusional, buy the thing.
Please do.
The link is in the description. It is Cinema, the Magic Vehicle. Do you actually have the spine to read the real history, see the full film credits, and understand the political mechanics for yourself, or are you staying lazy and just taking our word for it? Your call entirely.
I highly, highly recommend you read it because you will see that Bed and Sofa is a masterclass in establishing mood and tension. It just is. You can sit there and complain about the pacing or the fact that the men are terrible, but that is the entire point of the exercise.
If you say so.
It is a brilliant, unflinching look at human flaws when the safety net of society is ripped away.
Unflinching. It is a 2-hour stare at a dirty wall. It is a fascinating mess, I will give you that. The toxic relationships are interesting in a car crash sort of way, and the hidden cameras are a neat trick, but to call it a pristine masterpiece is a joke. It is a highly flawed experiment.
Well, I disagree entirely, and the weight of cinematic history supports me. But I want to leave you with a final thought to mull over.
Go on, then.
The source material notes that the original title of the film, Tretia Meshchanskaya, or Third Bourgeois Street, was actually meant as an ironic joke by the creators, highlighting the absurdity of their situation.
A joke, right.
If an ambivalent mood and a half-satirical, darkly comedic take on shattered social norms was the mechanism they used to process the absolute trauma and chaos of the 1920s, well, how different is that really from the dark comedies and the cynical satires we use to process our own modern societal upheavals today?
That's actually a fair point.
When our structures fail, do we just laugh at the absurdity of the room we're trapped in? Are we just repeating the exact same coping mechanisms they used 100 years ago?
Yeah. Well, at least our modern comedies have sound. Cheers.